This huge immersion into the historical research is not to get precious or nerdy or exclusive. It's to get it inside the actor's very being. If you're doing a modern play, and in the play, a character says, "What are we having for dinner?" and the other says, "Pizza," I'm never going to ask somebody to look it up. We know a lot about it. We know what it tastes like. We know different kinds. We know thin crust from thick crust. Pizza is embodied. Our job is, how do you make the word Shaw uses as visceral and experienced as pizza?
Let's get this Shaw on the road. Wherever you are, get in your car and come on down, enjoy a show. If it's your first time, well, jump on in. By the end of this drive, you'll be a shavy in. No, let's get this Shaw on the road.
Have you heard the good news?
A little birdie may have told me we're trending?
We're trending on Apple Podcasts.
What? Okay, wait a minute, though. You are my tech guru here.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean?
Okay, well, it's a pretty big deal for us as a new podcast with a brand new audience. The fact that Apple Podcasts, that the ghost of Steve Jobs is looking down on us saying, you know what? This might be a show that is worth pushing in the algorithm. Basically, it means they're looking at our show, they're seeing how it's performing, they're seeing that all of you, the listeners, are out there listening, and they're saying, hey, we want to show everyone else this. We trust that this is high quality content. We want more ears to hear this. So this is this is really
big
deal
exciting
for us. Yeah.
I can't believe it. When you sent me that screenshot of like, hang on a minute, and I sort of went, what? Like, is this real? And we had that back and forth of kind of going, but is it just us? Is it our algorithms on our listening platforms?
Yeah, I kind of thought it was just because of my device, because it's showing me what I already know. And so what I want to say, I guess first we should welcome any new listeners that we have.
Yes.
This is great. Welcome to have you here. We are the Shaw Festival. Yeah. We are one of North America's last standing repertory theater companies. And what we do on this show is every week we pull back the curtain, we meet some of Canada's top theater talent, and we talk about the creative process, what it takes to put on a show, and what our personal lives are like as creators in this industry. Right now is a really good time because we can strike while the iron is hot. If you haven't already, please subscribe and follow. That'll mean every Thursday when we release a new episode, you'll get it fed right into your podcast player. And it'll also help to spread the word to more people who haven't yet heard of our show. So our season is well underway right now. We're fully into the swing of the season. How are things going for you so far?
It's good. I'm definitely in the thick of things at the moment. At this moment in time, we're in work-throughs for Gannett, and that means that we're layering in the technical elements step by step, cue by cue. And then I'm also in the work-throughs and putting May I Have the Pleasure, which is our beautiful show on social dancing. We're setting that up in the Spiegel tent. So it's two very different venues, two very different vibes and feels. But
I can't wait to see it. There's a little bit of chatter going on in backstage about May I Have the Pleasure. I share a dressing room with Jason Kadjia, who's in your show.
Yes.
And he is just revved up about what he's getting to do in the show.
And it's really interesting with him because he would qualify himself as a non-dancer. Like, he's not a dancer. And yet what he has said is every day that he walks out of rehearsal that he's been dancing, he's just happier generally in life. His life feels happier. And you go, that's exactly what we're doing with this show.
I love to hear it. That's so good.
Yeah, it's really great. How about you? How is your season so far?
Oh, it's good. It's really good. So we're open, both the shows now, Lion Witch and Anything Goes. And the audiences have been really responsive, both for, Anything Goes, we leave and I walk through the parking lot and I give people waving out the window saying, we loved it, good show, which feels so great. And then Lion Witch, personally, for me with Lion Witch, my daughter has come to see the show 4 times now.
Oh,
and
my
maybe by the time this goes out, maybe there'll be a 5th time. And she's obsessed. She loves it. She's 6 years old. And when we first started putting the piece together, I thought, I'd like for her to come see it, but it might be it might be a bit much to ask her to sit through a 2-hour play, but from the very first viewing, she was captivated. Wow. She knows that story inside and out. Lucy is her favorite.
Of course. Amelia would be Lucy if I was to,
she
cast her in this.
Is Lucy.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So, it's a really special season for that right there.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
We should probably get on with our chat with Peter and Gillian about the Major Barbara experience.
If you don't know Peter by face, you would know his name. He has done so many productions here. He was the former artistic director of the NAC. You may have seen his work recently with Shadow of a Doubt. He did an Octoroon. My first experience working with him was Cabaret in 2014, I want to say, which was such a positive experience. His table work, as you're going to hear in this interview, his depth of research and the amount that he dives into really unpacking and figuring out every little nook and cranny of the piece is unlike most other processes that I've been in.
And then we've got the beautiful Gillian Gallow. So this is a real opportunity for us to talk to a Seminovich Prize winner. I mean, this is an amazing thing that we have her here working at the Shaw Festival. And you may have seen her work in Shadow of a Doubt, the Mahabharata, the Doctor's Dilemma. I mean, her work here has really been a gift for all of us who have that chance to encounter her.
But before that, why don't we listen to what TC has to say about why he put Major Barbara in the season.
It's much more of an art than a science, deciding which Bernard Shaw play or plays you're going to do in a season. There is always, of course, the desire to come up with something that's topical, but we have a sort of problem and a solution when it comes to being topical with Bernard Shaw. The problem is that we have to program the play probably 18 months before it actually opens, so you don't know what will have happened in the world in the meantime by the time you open. The redemption from that problem comes in the fact that Bernard Shaw has a knack of being topical whenever you do him. So, as it happens, here we have a play about whether it is inevitable that humans will destroy each other, and what is our relationship to pacifism as opposed to what is euphemistically called defense. It reminds me, of course, of George Orwell's point about doublespeak, that the Ministry of War is always called a Ministry of Defense. And this is a very Shavian preoccupation. It does come up in some of his other plays, but Major Barbara hits our moment right in the middle. And yet, as I say, it feels to me as though any Shaw play you pick at any time hits the moment in the middle because he never stops being relevant.
And in terms of bringing in Peter Hinton to direct this and Gillian Gallow to do the set design for it, what's that relationship between the director coming in to do this play?
Well, the first thing to say is if you're going to do a Shaw play, you need a clever director. There's no point being embarrassed about that. And you'll notice, if you look back at the directors I've had doing Shaw plays here, it's people like Ida Holmes, Kimberly Rampersad. These are bright people who can cope with the complexity of the arguments, but they're not just clever, they're also, if you like, really philosophically interested in ambiguity and difficulty. They're not people who want to make a sloganizing or moralistic lesson out of a production, because they know that Bernard Shaw isn't that kind of writer, but also their own personalities are much more about provocation than about education. So I know that Peter and Gillian, whom I worked with on Importance of Being Earnest a couple of years ago, and I think is just a genius designer, I know that they will be working away on creating a world that is not just appropriate to the action of the play, but contains the same mixture of horror and seduction around the idea of violence.
All right. Well, I think this is actually so fitting in a way. Fitting. Oh, that was actually not the pun I meant. But the fitting being that Gillian, you have to run to a fitting shortly. So this conversation is going to be a little bit different, but it does actually reflect what is happening in real time here at the Shaw Festival, which is there is an emergency bonnet fitting that has to happen. So, Gillian, maybe just briefly before you have to actually leave and then come back, can you just tell us what happens in a fitting?
In this particular case, because it's for headwear, we bring in the actor, we get them into their wig, which is very important when wearing a hat because your head size changes dramatically.
Yes, I guess it would, yes.
You cannot wear the hat without the wig. So we put them in the wig and then we're going to put on the bonnet and just make sure everything is fitting properly and is comfortable for the performer.
Right.
And looking right because once they're on stage, we can't change anything.
Right. So you're in this is your last day even here at the Shaw Festival before you leave. And so are these the final touches? This is the last opportunity you have really to put any last bits on the show.
Exactly. And this bonnet in particular is put on in a quick change. And so we're just trying to make it as easy as possible to be done in the dark and stay on the head when she is involved also in a fight. So it's just it's a complicated moment in the show. So
would you mind explaining to some of our listeners who might not know what a quick change is?
It's when an actor has to change their costume in a very short period of time. A quick change is less than a minute. Anything more than that is considered sometimes a luxury.
That's amazing. And so, Gillian, maybe, and again, we're sort of going to focus on you in this part of the conversation, and then we'll hop over to you, Peter. So if you just hang tight, because I know Gillian will have to leave in a short second, but I'm just curious about how you got started in theater.
I was pretty fortunate to go to a high school that had a very strong theater program. And we participated in the Sears Drama Festival many times. And I also had a teacher that cared about design. So she, as a part of our curriculum, had us build a maquette for a show. So we designed a show, built a maquette. It just so happened that year, that set I designed was used in the Sears Drama Festival. And I was also cast in the show. And when I kept missing rehearsal because I was too busy painting the set, I realized that maybe I should not be in the show. I was far more interested in the designing part. So that's where it began. So it was a pretty straight line. I went to York University after that.
And could you describe to us what a maquette is?
It's a scaled version of the set design. So a maquette is basically a model. So you see this in architecture all the time where they build smaller versions of the building so that everyone knows what it's going to look like. We do the same thing with our set designs so that the director as well as the entire production team knows what they're getting into.
Okay. And what's your connection with the Shaw Festival? How did the Shaw Festival find you?
I think it was with Peter. I came here and we did an Octoroon together. And that was our first show. It was my first time here. And
that was 2017.
It was a while ago.
Yeah. So had you two worked together before that?
We had.
Where did you first start working together?
Our first production together was King Lear at the National Arts Center. But I met Peter before that, working on a production that he had brought to the National Arts Center, a production called Night. And we met I don't know if we met in Pond Inlet, but that's where we first spent time together.
Yeah.
Mitimataluk now, in Nunavut. Yeah.
And what is it that draws you back? What is that relationship, that connection to that designer? And Gillian, if you need to head out, you just take your departure. We'll talk up until as close as it is that you have to leave. But and then we'll hope that you can come back to join us for the end. But what is that dynamic? How did you find that first connection to each other? And again, you keep coming back as collaborators. Maybe Peter, you could talk a little bit about that relationship that you have.
Yeah, sure. I think what I love about working with Gillian is, you can maybe think that design is about how you decorate a play, but Gillian is really interested in how the play is built, what it requires, what it's saying, what it needs. And there's no one aesthetic or one approach or one way of solving that problem. To me, the design is the dramaturgy of the production because it's inviting the audience into seeing the play in a very particular way. And that was an enormous part of the process of designing Major Barbara and of how Shaw plays have been done at the Shaw Festival and what they might require now. The majority of our design time is talking about the play and what it means and what it's saying and how does an audience receive it.
And this production is incredible. The design, it really does arrest you when that curtain goes up, the vibrancy of the color of that set. And maybe, Gillian, you can talk a little bit about this. How is it that you, in the abstract world, how do you find those key things? How do you draw something like that out of a George Bernard Shaw play, that density of text, the arguments? What is that inspiration to look at this, creating this open, beautiful, stunning space that you've set the play in for this production?
Well, I would say that a design like this doesn't happen with just any director. So equally for me, working with Peter, he's deeply interested in how the design affects the story. I would say exactly the same thing he said just about our conversations and what they center around, and that's what I'm interested in. Sometimes I don't even know how the ideas come or how we ended up at one solution. I can't necessarily follow a clear thread. It's an evolution that we spend a lot of time coming to, and it evolves slowly through lots of thinking and talking, but it's not necessarily directly, oh, what color is the set going to be? You know, it just evolves based on discussions and images. So it's really hard to say how that all happens, but it is a lot of talking just about the play, which doesn't happen all the time.
And so what was it about Major Barbara, and what were you uncovering that was really starting to show itself as you were in these discussions?
I was going to say, I remember your props list, which is
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
kind of the thing that unlocked. So Peter came to a meeting one day and said, I did a props list, which is very unusual. Most directors haven't done a props list. So he said, I've done a props list, and there's not very many props in this show. And, you know, you can get overwhelmed by Shaw's stage directions and think you need everything that is described. You think you need the settee and the cushion and the things. But when we actually looked at what was needed in the show, there's no tea scene, there's no dinner scene. It's very minimal. So as soon as that realization came, it kind of opened up the world.
Gillian, I am looking at the clock right now, and I'm guessing you need to head off to your fitting. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, well, good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that relationship between what you get from Shaw in the description of these very elaborate, detailed set and stage directions that he provides, and then looking at how much do you take on of that and how much do you release of that. What was the inspiration to go through the play for that props list?
There is always a kind of annoying but necessary question that happens when you take on a historical play. People say, oh, you're directing Major Barbara. What period are you setting it in?
Right.
As though that's the first place you start. You know, I am equally skeptical about just assuming because the play was written in 1905, it's all set in 1905, and we get kind of museum-y or historical about it. Nor do I just leap to, oh, we're doing it in 2025, we must set it now, we're going to modernize it. And it's funny because I've done both with Shaw, with Shakespeare, with Congreve, with all kinds of public domain repertoire like that. And I understand why people ask it. And we've seen that at the Shaw. We've seen people take an Edwardian play and set it in the 1950s in an attempt to bridge it more into a visual memory, maybe. And Shaw had very interesting ideas about this. So, for example, in Pygmalion, there's motor cars, there's radio technology that he uses. So he was telling a contemporary story. He wanted it to resonate with people as a modern tale. And if you contrast that to like You Never Can Tell, which in his preface, he argues very vehemently that you must not set this play in any other time than the 1890s. It's a play about the 1890s and about a very particular movement in British politics and British culture of that time. And so he was not generic about it. And, maybe his best example is Caesar and Cleopatra, where he radically took a play set in ancient Rome and had people speak in a contemporary vernacular. He had people talk like modern people. And that preface reminds us that anyone who has a trouble with that forgets that Cleopatra lived closer to the invention of the telephone than she did to the building of the Sphinx.
Wow.
It's interesting, eh? How we approach history and how we approach modernity is such a key thing I think about as a director all the time. I mean, if you're doing a play in 1905, you want to go, what made this play so urgent and necessary in its time? And yet we're doing it in 2025. So how does it land for people?
And what was that for Major Barbara? What were you finding in that vein?
Well, it's so interesting because the stage directions are really pertinent insights to his intention. Shaw was, in many respects, a director as well as a playwright. He was at every single rehearsal. He had opinions about everything, about how the show was done, how it was performed. His letters to Louis Calvert, who originated the role of Undershaft, are infamous. Notes of, you were ruining my play, blah, 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 blah. They are a drama in itself.
You're writing that to Patrick Galligan playing Undershaft right now.
Never. Like, they're so intense. And like the audience gets to see this season in Dear Liar. This kind of relationship Shaw had with actors wasn't exclusive to Mrs. Patrick Campbell alone. But those stage directions contain knowledge about how he saw the play, how he envisioned its ideas. They're not just decorations. They're not just a cabinet stage left. He is saying something about the people and what they believe.
So could you take us through a little bit of the story of Major Barbara? If someone was coming down to the Shaw Festival, just wonder if you could just take us through, what is that play about?
Well, it's about a very wealthy aristocratic family who, like a lot of aristocrats at that time in 1905, had a lot of prestige, a lot of power, a lot of influence, but not a lot of money. And Lady Britomart Undershaft is separated from her husband, who is not aristocratic. He is a munitions manufacturer, and he has become one of the most rich men in the world. She is separated from him and raised their 3 children on her own, away from what she calls his immoral and wicked influence. And time has come, and all of her daughters are about to get married, and their money coffers are running thin. And so she is left with no choice, she feels, but to invite her munitions husband back after a 20-year absence to get some money and to ensure that her son, Stephen, inherits the munitions factory, its businesses, its fortunes. And he, of course, despises everything about the aristocratic class and their own philosophies and argues that they are more dangerous to the peaceful well-being of society and its advancement than he is, who is a maker of cannons, guns, torpedoes, and a newly devised aerial battleship. And out of that comes 2 very different philosophies about what is needed for the 20th century. Why is it called Major Barbara? One of his daughters, her reaction to all of this is she joins the Salvation Army, and she sees poverty as the great blight of her time, and that Christian charity and relieving people of poverty through a spiritual power, she believes that is the only way we can move forward. So you've got these 3 arguments of an aristocratic belief in the English national character and the nation and empire. You've got the capitalist who's saying we must make money. We must have an international marketplace and be at the top of that. And then you've got the spiritualist who's saying we must appeal directly out of Christian fortitude. And the play collides those three ideas together with great ambiguity about which is correct and which is the most evil.
I think that's what I love about George Bernard Shaw's plays, is he doesn't have one right answer. It's all of these perspectives, and what the plays encounter are the debates, are the sides of those individual perspectives bumping up against each other, like in a family situation, which we actually have quite a lot of happening in the world today.
Oh, yeah.
What's it like working with the actors with this text? Because these ideas and these passages of text in a Shaw play can be really dense. And there's a lot of different points of view and a lot of things you have to cover. How do you work with the actors on how to make that feel like it's a thought I'm having for the first time? It's not a preconceived argument that I've had planned and I'm saying all these words of this text.
Yeah. Well, in the case of Major Barbara, I'm very fortunate because I have wonderful actors to work with. But, it's intimidating. Actors are so smart and they have an actor's intelligence about when people tell the truth and when people lie. And they will defend their character when they lie because they know they need to stand for what they are fighting for and willing to risk in their lives. Major Barbara is very daunting because it requires a very specific and deep intellectual education about the period in which it's written and what's implied by it.
Well, and you do these amazing immersive rehearsals off the top. I mean, that's one thing that I'm from myself, having worked with you on a number of plays here at the Shaw, the depth of the research and really immersing yourself in the world.
Yeah.
It becomes a foundation. We need to have that because the imaginative world that you can descend into becomes that much deeper when you have that knowledge and that base.
Totally.
Where did you go for some of the research for Major Barbara? What were some of the focus you had? I know it's broad.
No, one thing I do have is I have a lot of knowledge of that time. Largely through the work that I've done in the theater. I think the early 20th century is as disruptive and reinvented and radical a time as the Renaissance of Shakespeare was. And is far from the kind of bad rap this period can get for being, old dead white males and it's all traditional and not at all. That was not the vibe of the time. You got to remember, Shaw's plays, many of them were banned and could only be performed in private theaters because the censors of the day would not allow them to be performed. So you've got to tap into what is so radical in this that would shock people the way it does, and how do you then bring it forward into a current time? It's that. So I believe so much in the actor's intelligence, and I believe in the audience intelligence. And that's not that you have to know what Bernardo Homes are, or that you have to know what the Primrose League is to get the joke. The actor, you have to know what it is. And you have to know it in a way as viscerally as if I say Donald Trump, if I say Beyonce, you don't have to go look it up in a book.
Right. It's a feeling. You have a
feeling, you have an opinion, you have a point of view.
Yeah.
You go, I love Beyonce. I can't stand Beyonce or whatever. You've got a fully lived relationship to it. So that this huge immersion into the historical research is not to get precious or nerdy or exclusive. It's to get it inside the actor's very being. And the image I use in rehearsal all the time, and we end up using it as a practice, is I call it pizza pieing. And what this is about is if you're doing a modern play, and in the play, a character says, "What are we having for dinner?" and the other says, "Pizza." I'm never going to ask somebody to look it up. I'm never going to say, Alexis, could you get the Oxford English Dictionary and look up pizza? For like, I would go so far as to say a modern actor is this incredible authority about pizza. We know a lot about it. We know what it tastes like. We know different kinds. We know thin crust from thick crust. We have an opinion on pineapple. We have so much knowledge. So much so, I could invite anyone listening to this podcast to smell, and you could probably smell it. It's that alive. So pizza is embodied. Our job is, how do you make the word Shaw uses as visceral and experienced as pizza? And it's this phenomena that somehow the more specific you are, the more universal you can be. And it's an interesting thing, and perhaps a kind of ominous thing, that a play written in 1905 can speak so pertinently to 2025.
Yeah. That was what hit me, was the direct line between what that conversation is, what's happening between these characters, and just going, that debate is still happening right now. And I'm always struck that when I watch a Shaw play, that story, that argument is so profoundly of today that really, in fact, it highlights just how little has changed, how much we're on these cycles of having these same arguments or debates, or these same collisions of humanity are still happening, and the relevancy of that. And so again, if I was to look at the playbill and go, oh, I'm going to come see a Shaw, what would be something that you hope people might come and see Barbara to experience?
I think what a play like Major Barbara does, like yesterday at a talk back, we had a preview and an opportunity for the audience to talk with actors after. And one of the audience members asked this question, like, given everything that's happening in the world, how do you be okay doing this play every day? Like, how do you create some safety for yourself, some well-being, some mental wellness through it all? Because the play goes right into the heart of it. And the beautiful actor Sepir Ribad, who plays Bill Walker and Charles Lomax, what he commented on was somehow that doing the play made him feel saner about the world he lived in, suggesting that somehow to not deal with it or to just be distracted from it, which we all need from time to time, but actually to cast some light on it, that he felt better coping with the anxieties about the world by doing Major Barbara.
By doing the play.
By talking about
incredible.
it. And giving you a very organized way to do it and a satirical way to do it. Major Barbara is a satire. And satire we might think of as being This Hour is 22 Minutes or Saturday Night Live, where what satire was really about was showing the world not as it ought to be, but as it is. The greatest definition of satire comes from Jonathan Swift. And Swift describes satire like this, as satire reflects the world like a mirror in which you recognize every single character except yourself. So you see, you go, yes, that's the prime minister of my country. Yes, that's my partner. Oh yeah, that's my landlord, but I'm not in it. So Shaw is saying, I don't care if you relate to the character. Do you relate to this situation? And you see everybody else and you go, it's totally true. But then who are you in that is a more challenging proposition.
Right. Gillian is back. Yay.
How did the fitting go?
It went well. Thank you.
Good.
Problem solved to the best that they can be.
Yes, I mean, we have wonderful people here working on making it all better. And yeah, I think we've nailed it, but we'll see in the moment today. Yeah.
I was just asking Peter, Gillian, about this thing about relevancy with these classical plays and something like Major Barbara. What was your experience coming to this play in terms of where you were at in your world and any of those influences with classical text?
Oh my gosh, I'm very sorry to have missed the last 20 minutes.
We went into it.
And I feel like whenever I work with Peter, I learn so much. So it's always a gift to kind of be a part of those conversations. So I can't wait to hear what he said. I mean, what was interesting to me is I forget who I was speaking to, but they talked about having done Major Barbara so many years ago. And someone said, yes, but now it's so relevant, it's so meaningful. And he said, we said the same thing then. I find myself watching the show and just constantly being reminded of something I read that's contemporary, that's going on right now. It's shocking how Shaw has done that.
100 years, 120 years later. What is the relationship you have with the actors in terms of costumes? You've done these sketches, you and Peter have created this design, which often is we only see as performers on the first day of rehearsal. What's that conversation like between the actors and you in terms of getting to that final look, that final piece that they'll be wearing?
It's always a pretty exciting relationship. When I was kind of first starting, I found it so strange that I was arriving on first rehearsal and telling the actors what they were going to look like. It felt like it wanted to be more collaborative. You know, as much as we've determined things, there is an evolution that happens. It can be subtle. So, you know, simple things like undershaft. I think in the original plan, you know, he had a top hat. And it just felt too kind of aristocratic elite. So we changed it to a Homburg, and then we even ended up cutting it. So it's just like those small things can make a big difference into how the performer feels. So Patrick also as well had a walking stick. You know, it just wasn't necessary. But you have to be willing to go with those discoveries, and as he's discovering who Undershaft is, and I have to go along the journey with him and Peter and just make subtle changes that help tell that story.
I can't recall how many shows Gillian and I have done together, maybe 10 or something. But this show took a long time to arrive at the design. It was so hard. And I came across this little interesting thing, and I'll try to be really succinct. So Major Barbara, 1905, is this watershed year in Shaw's life. In 1905, Shaw wrote Man and Superman, John Bull's Other Island, and Major Barbara, all in that one year.
That's crazy.
If I wrote one play half as good as any of those three in my whole life, I'd be resting on my laurels. And Shaw described that the plays he wrote prior to 1905 are plays that looked back. They were comedies about the Victorian time and parodies and satires of those social values and mores. And that he was determined in 1905 to write plays that looked forward. He had a very wild, innovative idea in that. And so when Major Barbara premiered in November of 1905, the play takes place in January, and the registrar at the Court Theatre was preparing the program and said, okay, so scene 1, Lady Britomart's Library, January 1905. And Shaw goes, oh, no. It would be January 1906. Think about that. So you're sitting in the theater watching a play that takes place 2 months from now. That is a radical idea. And the reason he wasn't trying to be just clever or precious, he was saying, if I said it in January of last year, everyone will think back and go, oh yeah, was it like that? Oh yeah, what was going on then? So if I were to say, you know, I'm writing a play now and it's set in January 2024, you're going to go back to, oh yeah, what was happening? If I say I'm setting a play and it's in January 2026,
it changes.
And I'm talking about, what's happening militaristically in the world, what's happening globally. It's slightly forward. And he did it throughout his career. So like when people kept saying to us, when are you setting it? We went, in the future, slightly ahead.
And I would say that's exactly what we have in the experience of coming to see that play. It is undeniable. You are in the throes of a very relevant, current, and what are we going to do? Where do I see this world? How does this get resolved, if it even does?
Yeah. And then that's where the design came all out of that. That's where, how does it look? What color is it? How modern?
The colors. It's extraordinary, the colors. I mean, that palette. Okay, that's my last question, and then I have one little wrap up to do with both of you, and then I promise this has been, I feel like I could sit here for 3 more hours with both of you to go through this. But Gillian, could you talk about that color world? Because it's very vibrant. in this piece. Where did that layer in for you, or how did that arrive into the picture?
I honestly am trying to remember. There's the obvious relationship that Salvation Army blue is there, but I can't remember the exact reason. I do remember arriving at blue, like what color is this world? But the blue of the set, and then understanding that we had blood and fire being the motto of the Salvation Army, as well as undershaft in a way, right? They both exist. So red came in as a clear other element. I think it maybe is a subconscious thing, but there's red, white, and blue a lot in the show. So, which is a color of many powers in the world, not just one, right? So I find that an interesting connection as well. But I'm going to be totally honest, I don't know, like we ended up with purple, and you think red and blue make purple. It wasn't an obvious decision, but it was just what happened in our discussions.
It's so interesting the way that the intellect catches up to instinct. Like you have an impulse. You have an instinct about something, and someone will say, why do you have that impulse? And you go, I don't know. And then you have to go, oh, that's why. Actors do it all the time. They don't necessarily go, I'm going to burst into tears at this moment. It's like they do because it happens in them. And then you've got to process why and what it might mean.
Which is why I love the discussions that we have. Peter and I talk about the play so much so that instinct can be trusted, so that you can make those decisions and not totally understand that decision. And watching the play, I go, oh, well, that makes sense. Why we did that, but I didn't necessarily know at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What was driving that decision? Okay, this is my last question for you. We've been asking everyone who comes on as a guest. If let's get this Shaw on the road. I'm in my car. I'm on my way to the Shaw Festival. I have my ticket and I'm sitting down in the theater. What is something I could keep my eye out for? Is there something that I could get a little insider on, or something that you think would be a good pin that I could keep my attention focused on?
I know what I would say. I don't know. Peter can go first. I would say transitions are a part of the storytelling. So watch the transitions and watch everyone in the transitions.
Okay, great. Excellent.
That's interesting. Mine's kind of related to that. Many of the actors in Major Barbara play two parts. One plays three. And one might think that that's just a necessity of economy or whatever, that people play two parts. But Barbara makes a very compelling and urgent argument that there are no good or wicked people. We're all one. We're both good and bad. And so I invite an audience coming, when you see characters in the East End at the Salvation Army, to think about who they double with in the aristocratic world. And there's a little scene in Act 3 where the character of Charles Lomax apologizes to Barbara. And if you think about who Charles Lomax is in the Salvation Army, it's incredibly moving because he plays probably her greatest antagonist.
This has been a really lovely deep dive into Major Barbara, but also this world of Shaw and this real landscape of creating this relationship between classics, those classical texts, these plays, and what is happening in our world today. So thank you for this great conversation. And thank you, Gillian, for jumping out and coming back in. This is real time. This is the theater world. So thank you for your time, both of you.
Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Major Barbara is playing until October 5th. Tickets available at shawfest.com.
Thank you to Peter Hinton-Davis and Gillian Gallow for joining us. And thank you, as always, for listening. If you have any questions, thoughts, or just want to say hello, drop us a line at podcast@shawfest.com.
Let's Get This Shaw on the Road is hosted by Alexis Milligan and produced by me, Kelly Wong. Original music by Travis Cito. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to us right now. Follow the show to get new episodes in your feed every Thursday. And if you're enjoying it, leave us a review. It helps others discover the show and join in on the conversation.
Next week, we are joined by Jay Turvey and Matt Alfano. We'll chat about La Vie en Rose, and I think someone sneaky stops by.
We'll see you then.
Let's get this Shaw on the road.